All right. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. As Duff pointed out earlier, your participation here is actually very important to the success of PDF at large, because even though we might be a relatively smallish group here today, every one of us that participates and spreads the word a little bit helps to create the swell of activity around PDF that ultimately makes it even more successful. So thank you for participating, and the more you can participate in standards committees or whatever, the better for everyone. All right, my name is Drew, and I'm here today with Paul Abdul, and Paul will present our 4-minute segment on Solimar later. Be happy to talk with any of you when you feel you'd like to. The talk today is focused on optimizing transactional workflows. Now, this is particularly relevant to financial services. Why? Because financial services does a lot of high-volume mailing, mail pieces that are typically fairly expensive to produce and often have very high dollar values associated with them. Now, a little background on Solimar, just brief. We've been doing this since 1998. Way back then, Adobe Reader, if you had it, could not read beyond 32,000 pages in a file. Now, that might seem like a whole lot of pages, but when you consider the size of some of these print jobs that companies are running, that just didn't quite make it. So we worked with Adobe and sorted that out, and over time they got up to 64,000, and then ultimately removed the limits on that. On the trip over yesterday, I had an opportunity to watch a movie. I thought I'd share this with you just as a little blessing as we go forward. If you get the opportunity, watch the movie 100-Foot Journey. It's tender. It's ultimately very inspiring. So if you have a quiet moment in a day, take a time to watch that. It's really wonderful. All right. What is transactional output? Well, your utility wants you to pay them for the electricity you've used. They send you a bill. The bank wants you to know how much money you have. They send you a statement. Worse, the county wants you to show up, and they send you a jury summons. Those are all examples of transactional output. And those are all examples of content that need to be sent first-class mail in the United States. They share in common that they tend to be produced in very large volumes, single jobs, oftentimes 1,000 pages, often 100,000 pages, sometimes even more, 1,000,000 pages in a single file. You can see some of the types of documents, statements, invoices, EOBs, which are in healthcare, explanation of benefit, insurance policies, confirmations, all kinds of things. Sometimes there are legal obligations associated with these documents, and they are all highly personalized. So how does one go about producing this? Well, usually in the back office of your business. How many of you here are associated with producing high volumes of mail? Okay, all right, well that's good. You have to populate a data set. You're going to gather the information about the people you're going to be sending stuff to. If you're really good at this, you do some sorting on that to take advantage of postal discounting. You're going to format that data so it looks nice when it arrives in your customer's mailbox. You're going to send it to print. You're going to automatically insert that into envelopes unless things aren't going so well and you got to do it by hand. And then you're going to find the local Pony Express and you're going to drop it in a mail bag and off it goes to the West Coast. Now, how is this stuff produced? Well, historically, it's done with data streams, essentially formatting languages that look like this. Do any of you recognize any of these languages? They don't teach them in school for good reason. They're not that interesting. Okay. Now, some of you probably had 9-track tape players. 8-track, 9-track? 9-track means you live in a data center, right? Okay, all right. Cassette tapes. These data streams are all analogous to that kind of technology. What makes PDF different is that a PDF is like having a thumb drive, a disk drive, a CD. It's random access technology, where these are all pretty much like having that tape drive and trying to read data sequentially. Now, big savings in processing large volumes of mail come from getting the discounts that the post office is happy to share with you when you do the work of stripping the chaos out of dealing with millions of letters. If you could imagine somebody shows up with a truckload of letters and says, here, deliver them for me, you go, I'm going to pull my hair out. Well, there are machines that can help with this process, and the better that the post office can use those machines, the better for you. Thus, the big money saved in producing is stripping out the postage costs. So you go to the post office and you want to mail a 2-ounce letter, which is about anything more than 5 pages and less than 10, is going to cost you 70 cents. But your business can do that and get it all the way down to 38 cents. So that's a massive discount. And you can see where the costs of mailing can be absolutely huge. In the previous presentation, Peter spoke about savings of $1 million. Well, that's not so unusual at all when you consider the savings you can accrue from postal discounting. Now, how does PDF help organizations save on postage? Well, there are really 4 main ways in which PDF has been applied to do this. First is just basic electronic sorting. There's plenty of content circulating out there in the world that's legacy content, content that's been produced on a mainframe with a COBOL program that runs, and it really doesn't have the leverage of postal sort behind it. So one model that a number of companies have implemented is to convert that into PDF and sort once it's in a PDF, then submit to print. That's pretty straightforward. But from there, it can get even more sophisticated. Let's say you start cutting out envelopes. Let's say you're a credit union and you're doing bill pay for people. And all of a sudden you notice that there are a lot of people paying the same local vendors. Well, you can put those checks in the same envelope. That's called householding. And all of a sudden you're sending 1 envelope instead of 5 or 10 envelopes. Those savings multiply very quickly. Electronic commingling. Let's say you have mail pieces, but they're in different jobs. They might be different lines of business for a bank or an insurance company. Well, what happens is the post office loves it when you do something called saturate one of their service centers with mail. So if you can take content that's presented in different files, different jobs coming from your host system, and take the content that goes to the same postal service center and put it together, you can take advantage of those higher discounts that accrue from that. This is something that PDF, by virtue of all those capabilities that Duff spoke about in his first presentation, I'm not going to recite those endlessly for you, but if you have specific questions about them later, we can certainly go over them. But those are the kinds of things when you're mixing content across jobs that PDF does so beautifully, that those other data streams, the 9-track, 8-track, cassette kinds of data streams don't do very naturally. And then there's hybrid workflows. It's becoming more prevalent for people to produce content for an audience of 1. That means that when you go to a website, it may be your insurance company, they produce a little package of information for you right then. But that's just 1 piece of information. And imagine that there are 20,000 other people that day doing that. To automate that, you don't want to have to go produce 20,000 one-recipient jobs. It's very difficult to get the leverage for the discounting from that. So what do? You aggregate those jobs. You put those 20,000 into 1, and then you can sort it, and you can leverage those discounts. And this, again, is something that PDF does so beautifully. It leverages those audience of one kind of scenarios. All right. I'm not going to quantify the potential savings from all of that, but use your head. If you're doing 100,000 pieces and you save 20 cents a day on each one of those pieces, and you multiply by however many days in a year you're going to do that production, that's a big number. All right, but that's not the limit of where PDF brings benefits to production, high volume, transactional output. We get into the operational areas. There are lots of ways that PDF brings the technology needed to implement the operational improvements that make your business leaner, meaner, and overall better at communicating with end users. Electronic content assembly. So sometimes information exists on technology islands. And these islands have no way of sharing that information. They may have different formatting engines going on behind the scenes, creating content, and you end up sending different bits of information to people in different envelopes or manually collating that stuff can get pretty ugly. So with PDF, you can, even if that stuff doesn't originate as PDF, it may originate as a data stream like a legacy format, maybe AFP. You get it into PDF. In fact, you might have disparate data streams coming from those technology platforms, and you can weave it together into single document packets, and then do all the other stuff that we talked about before. The benefits are obvious. You eliminate labor, you get the benefit of decreased postage from single enveloping, and you don't have to throw out those legacy systems and platforms because replacing them can be hugely expensive to an organization. One of the biggest savers in terms of just money, manpower, machinery, electricity, it's very green, it's the most green thing going on out there in the print space, is white paper workflows. So imagine that you're an insurance company and you've been printing stuff with pre-printed letterhead for a long time, and you've got a fleet of cut sheet printers as big as this room or bigger to produce that output. And certain trays have certain kinds of paper media in them, letterhead, some other have other sheets of drilled paper or something like that. And all of a sudden, you go, wow, we're wasting a lot of this paper. It sits in this warehouse waiting to be used, and by the time it's over here, it's been run into by a picker of some sort, or the temperature wasn't right, and it can't go through the machine, all that kind of stuff. So you end up with a lot of waste. Well, with PDF, you can leverage that variable data and merge it with an image of what would have been on that letterhead, and all of a sudden, all you're doing is adding that content to white paper. So you print on huge rolls of white paper with far fewer machines than you had before. You're using a lot less electricity. You're getting your work done faster than you were before. The benefits of this are enormous. And a lot of people are catching on to this. And you may not have been familiar to this point with PDF used in the transactional space, though it is widely used. But the space for using those really high volume devices has been confined more in a space for applications like telephone bills and things like that, utility bills. But as people catch on to the benefit of saving on waste and the ordering logistics for the paper necessary, just eliminating that whole pre-printed paper workflow, they're switching over to this model of a continuous feed inkjet. And this is creating enormous pull for PDF-based workflows. Okay, so you've probably received in your mail a zillion times these little sheets of paper that you immediately throw out. They're called inserts. They're usually marketing pieces that you're really not interested in because they're not even relevant to you, right? Well, PDF helps to solve this problem. Because imagine that you're actually sticking those little pieces of paper in an envelope. That's a relatively complicated problem to solve. You have to get a machine that can do that while it's inserting your other letter. Well, skip all that. Just put your marketing message right onto the very sheet that I'm going to read anyway, right? But make it relevant to me. And PDF helps one do that. You can dynamically generate the content necessary to do the messaging when you produce the content that you're going to print. Thus, you don't have all that pre-printed stuff sitting around that people are just going to throw in the trash anyway. And you can also calculate, based on how many sheets you know that you're generating, whether to generate a message at all, because it's going to actually increase your postage. And if it's going to increase your postage, it may not be worth the message because the hit rate may not justify it, right? If so few people respond to those marketing messages, well, only do it when it's something you get for free with the envelope you're already paying for. So this actually is a very wise and very green model for doing business because you can get rid of more expensive or not have to procure more expensive insertion technology than you actually need. And you can get your work done faster. And you can go to that white paper workflow. Electronic proofing. Now, this is a big money saver. Why? Because so few people do it already. A lot of the work in the transactional space is done with those data streams none of us learned in school, right? So how do you proof those things? It's very hard. You have to have the right tools. Well, those tools are expensive. And one of the things that has made it more expensive than necessary to do work in this space is the fact that those data streams are so poorly known. The tools that are used to manipulate them are held in the hands of a relatively few number of people. And we're guilty. We're among those few people. Right? But by opening this up more and people using PDF more, it lowers the cost. It becomes more ubiquitous. PDF is already pervasive, right? But there's a huge opportunity for it to be more widely used in the transactional space. And as it is more widely used, it leverages the plethora of lower cost tools available. So when people go out to find tools to build AFP, well, you have to spend some money to do that. Why? Because the companies that make the software to make the AFP know that you're going to spend money. But if you do that same task in a PDF environment, you're more likely to find a tool that's less expensive. So PDF creates huge leverage for everyone because of the viability of more tools at a lower cost and bringing these collateral savings as well. Electronic proofing being one such workflow. Everybody is comfortable with PDF. Why? Because Duff said 1 million, and then he said maybe 10 million people are using it. I dare say it's probably 1 billion people have Reader installed somewhere, a phone, a desktop. So you cut out the mistakes because people get a chance to see what they're going to get before they get it, and they get to say yay or nay. Also, when you cut out those mistakes, not only are you saving the paper you would have wasted, but you're also saving the time that it took to do that. Let's see how we're doing here. We're doing good. Item reprints. Now imagine things start getting smashed along the way. What are you going to do about that? You got to go reprint them. Those other tape-based data streams, and I use the word tape-based a little bit loosely here. They're not really literally tape-based, but they're like that. When you have something based around a disk drive, it's intuitive. You can find that easier. You can go extract that one mail piece, print that, and get it going. This eliminates the extra waste associated with having to find those files, mail pieces in a bigger job or a sequential job. But it's a very automatable task now. And that's really a value there because the automation is where a lot of these benefits come from. Now imagine that you are a phone company and you're producing bills and you know your bill looks like a detail page, an invoice page, and then a bunch of detail pages, which are endless reams of phone calls, right? Now, nobody really cares about those calls, but they sometimes want to have them. So if they're not that valuable, why not devalue them in terms of what it costs you to mail them? And PDF provides a great facility for doing that. And that is, you can easily rotate and scale content with PDF and even populate it onto the same smaller page. Try doing that with any of those other data formats. And so all of a sudden, something that had to go in a flat can go in an envelope. And the savings there are enormous. A flat is an envelope like this, right? One of the big ones. Those cost a lot more, not just a little bit more. So, and also suppressing stuff. If people don't want to get it, don't print it for them. Just give it to them electronically. Very green. Now, sometimes something happens, a great flood hits. And you want to be able to get that mail out because you have to. But you can't do it at your facility because it's underwater. So what do? Well, with PDF, it's very easy to leverage that core technology for pulling stuff apart and repackaging it to provide basically decision time changes to the document that allow you to move content to remote facilities. You might have a backup facility in Chicago or Dallas that can get your mail out. Or you might, after householding this, decide, well, you know what? We want to get the pieces for the West Coast mailed from Salt Lake, the pieces for the South mailed from Atlanta, and the pieces for the Northeast mailed from Boston. Why? Because if the mail gets to the recipient sooner, the money starts flowing back faster. And the faster the money flows back, the greater the interest you get. It makes a lot of financial sense. Also, you end up with a device-independent workload. Why is that important? Well, let's say that this machine goes bump, all right? It's not useful. It didn't flood. It's just, now you got to move it over here. But this device understands something different. Okay, well, that problem is solved by changing the barcodes at decision time. PDF, again, is extremely powerful. And one thing that PDF does very well that some of those data streams just absolutely cannot is allow you to opaque content in white, with white. So, for example, you might have indicia, so-called OMR, that tell one very old inserter how to insert the pages, the sheets. But this one over here now needs a 2D barcode. Well, you can opaque that, replace it with the 2D, and away that thing goes. Okay, so a collateral benefit from that, aside from better utilization of your equipment and keeping up with your SLAs, is you can get cleaner documents. They're easier to read. You've probably seen plenty of documents that show up in your mailbox where the old postal barcoding model had like 2 barcodes that aren't even used anymore, and you're like, what is all this stuff? And still a lot of mail pieces come with stuff down the right-hand side or the left-hand side, just a whole string of characters. You're like, I wonder what kind of gibberish they're trying to track through that, right? All right. Now, I spoke just briefly ago about if you could distribute that stuff and collect the money sooner, you get the benefit of the increased cash flows, right? Well, this electronic mail, bulk mail distribution model is very opportunistic for PDF because it's very hard to do with some of the other data streams. PDF is device independent, right? Where many of the other data streams are very device dependent. So that device independency is really important to factor into your decisions that you make about producing transactional output. Do I really want to be bound to these particular vendors of equipment? PDF helps to free people. We're the free PDF initiative here, aren't we? All right. Now, starting to move outside the scope of printing and inserting, PDF provides great leverage. And in the previous presentation, this was spoken about a bit, where the content that lives on the printed page sometimes doesn't expose the biggest value of that information. And that is if you can lift that data and make it actionable by putting it into a database, now you've really got something that you can make decisions on. Or you can eliminate manpower that was associated with going through manual processes based on the very paper that you were printing in the first place. And some of the greatest leverages that we've seen are from people doing exactly this. The discussion about the dark data, in fact, kind of masked the discussion about the big data, and the discussion about the big data is all about what to do with the data that you can't really do anything with currently, right? And that's what PDF can help do a lot about. So it's really about automating workflows, unlocking data value. This one gets back to hardware, but for those who don't spend a lot of time on the operational floor, you might not realize that there are machines out there that do crazy things like once you've rolled out a roll of paper, rewind it the other way so you can put it on some insertion equipment or some other finishing device. Well, with PDF, going frontwards and backwards are pretty near the same thing because it's that random access technology, right? But we all know what happens when you play a record backwards, right? Stairway to Heaven? You've done that trick? I've never quite figured out what happens, but all right. So this really boils down to saving money because you don't need those specialized pieces of equipment to do that work. You do it in PDF, you do it electronically. Wow, you don't need that equipment to do that. And along the vein of let's make things easier to use, now moving into a discussion here about how PDF makes access to content better. use color to highlight the information you want people to know. If people owe you money, you want them to know that. Don't put it in black. Put it in red. Okay. A lot of the benefits are obvious. I've kind of skipped through these things, but if you all want a copy of the presentation later, happy to get it for you. Just give us a business card. Okay. Content security. Those other formats that I spoke about earlier, the AFP, DJE, all that good stuff, has nothing like this. There's no encryption. There's no password control. And in fact, in many of them, you can't even opaque content. And with PDF, you're living really in a digital portable world. So you have the benefit of e-delivery, so people can get print, and they can get it electronically, or they can get it electronically. But those documents are very flexible. And over time, we'll see a lot more of these features implemented where they have perhaps embedded audio or video, just maybe little helpful widgets that help people to understand how to interpret the information in the document. Alternate content, so that, gosh, this document was written for people who read English, but for a reader, meaning a software application that can read the document, there might be some alternate content there that says, well, here's what it is in Thai. If you're sending something to, for example, portions of Orange County in California where they have highly ethnic populations. Okay, other features we can talk about. Now, I'm not going to go through these specifically. I've just kind of dumped here. Duff gave us a long list, the laundry list, as it were, of PDF features, and here's just some of them that relate specifically to, that are leveraged in processing transactional data for the financial services space. But the future of PDF, I think, looks very bright. And here are some of those reasons why. I just spoke about the dual print electronic format. That's obvious, and it's leveraged throughout this whole talk track. But superior color support and the design tools are what have driven the use of PDF in the offset space. But they're driving its adaptation and acceptance in the transactional space. The more of these continuous feed devices that turn out, even if they are nominally AFP devices, well, guess what? Behind the scenes, they're printing PDF. Why? Because the AFP spec, realizing its limitations, has co-opted PDF, and so in many, many instances, people are sending PDF files to the AFP printer, and the only bit of PDF that they're using is the communication layer. Archiving is obvious. Extensibility within the specification for PDF, in fact, it is an extensible language. People can make it do what they want. There's a little, it's Appendix E, I believe. And that's important. Why? Because it's very flexible and adaptive, and you can't fully anticipate all the things people are going to want to do with PDF. The devil's in the details, right? And the things that your organization may want to do are already provided for within the PDF framework. I spoke about leveraging of the high-speed inkjet. Flexible business workflows. Being able to pick the equipment that you want and need. Being able to procure equipment that you're not charged a premium for because it's processing something a little outdated and specific. Those are important benefits of PDF. And as we move forward, and as you all evangelize the message about PDF, you're going to see a lot more of this stuff. So that's the spiel about transactional print in the financial services. And I think we're pretty close to running out of time, but maybe a little bit of time for questions if there are any.
Drew, you on the West Coast or the East Coast?
I'm in San Diego. We're kind of UK, East Coast, West Coast, distribution around the world. Yes.
Hi, you talked about the editing features. Do you produce software that does PDF editing?
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into the vendor stuff right now, but what we do in a nutshell is we provide a bridge for people that have technology platforms and want to be able to either print that or deliver it electronically. Now, a pivot point that we rely on heavily is PDF, but not exclusively. For example, the history of our business, we started by taking content that originated on AS400s. Anybody know what an AS400 is? And driving that to old Xerox cut sheet laser printers that were about the size of this desk here. Big stuff. And then over time, it's morphed. In fact, PCL at one point was hugely valuable to the world, although many of you may not have known that, but there was an explosion in the early 90s of companies producing, providing telephone services, telecom services, and then needing to print bills. Well, they did that all in PCL using Fox Pro as backends, believe it or not. Yeah. So LDDS WorldCom was doing 2/3 of their entire billing volume on just 80,000 printed pages, all done in PCL. How crazy is that? Does that answer your question for you?
I was really trying to get at the speed. And PDF documents with page inserts and the page moving if you had any information.
Oh, these are thousands of pages a minute that these tasks are done in. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your time. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Question related to the way the processing is happening on PDF. So, openly, I'll tell you, we're a very large provider of distribution services.
Great.
Tons of customers that have used and bought PDF from a creative perspective.
Yeah.
The challenge with PDF has always been the quality from an output standpoint when it looks to compare the print to the way that a document's visible online. In recent history, we haven't really seen a tremendous amount of movement towards generating better quality. So an example could be a picture, a logo, color logos, whatever it may be. The input needs to have better level of definition. I'm wondering if you have the ability to kind of give us a little direction about where inputs are now becoming standardized to help create better quality. It's the old model. Good stuff in, get good stuff out. Not so good in, not so good out.
What kind of devices are you printing to?
It could be inkjet, can be, it's always primarily continuous, can be laser. The foundation of the document is essentially one where, in most cases, transform is required from every PDF into an appropriate print language for the machines that we have.
The technology in the space is changing very quickly. If your device is more than a couple years old, it may be just running on old technology, and it just might be time to upgrade. If your controller is upgradable, you might want to speak to your vendor to see maybe they've upgraded their capabilities. If you're having to transform that PDF into something, you may be doing the wrong thing, because a well-built RIP, for example, if you're continuous feed or IPDS devices, it should have the Adobe Print Engine behind it. And you should be able to just send it a PDF, embed it in the IPDS, and it rips the PDF, and you don't have to go through the fidelity squeeze there. So you may need to switch printers, not 100% certain what you got, but take it up with your printer vendor.